Hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Actually, this what Tapati ma'am mentioned in the end was my actually source of, I was going to ask. I'm trying to play the devil's advocate here. Okay, my question would be: do we really need biases to go away from our systems? I mean, do we really need that thing? I mean, are we? Would the world where there would be no biases would be a better world? And that is something really. I mean, I was reading Friedrich Nietzsche's Beyond Good and Evil, and in the first very chapter, he mentioned that all the philosophers are talking about we should pursue truth. I mean, truth is the highest ideal. Nietzsche says, hold on, stop. Why truth? Why not something else? Why not some other virtue or morality? Why not? Why only truth? So my question would be, and it's more of a philosophical question. I mean, so
Mm-hmm.
feel free to jump in, and it's very subjective. Why would we really want the biases to go away? I mean, your thoughts, panelists.
uh, I can say on the same line what he was just talking about, like the same thing, right? Inherently, the biases are there in the process, and how we are structured as a society, and maybe as the whole world itself, maybe in the country and all, like how geographically even we are having a lot of biases towards the thing. And to coming to the same point, like forget about AI. If I'll be a banking manager today and I'll be processing the loan and I'll look at the application, I'll first see that the same thing. Like forget about the gender. I'll see move towards the collateral and what are the KPIs which is more prominent to give this that loan, right? Or maybe if it's a business like a woman entrepreneur or something, whether we have a scheme or not, what is the base where we can give that particular collateral, or maybe like look at the collateral and can give the loan. So if we see the how process here, there's a majority of times the rejection will be there at the ground level. Forget about the AI itself, right? Now, if we try to put that into a process where the machine is taking a decision, now we ask so much of questions and we get into this whole part why it is happening, and then AI is being unfair. It's a totally difficult world, because in the end, what we are going to do with that machine is also someone will supervise that, and again, the person will only take a decision or okay whether whatever the decision has been taken is right or not, and then he will take a decision. The AI, what can help is again get back into the explanatory part and tell why he has taken that decision. And on the top of it, human can clarify that okay, whatever decision has been taken under this circumstances, but we can we can look at the what exactly the situation is, and then we will go with this decision, yes or no. So it's a very difficult thing. I don't say that complete biases we will, as a society, will not be able to accept that, because
Yeah.
uh, it's a very tricky thing, and you can't be put everything on like just black and white. There are a lot of gray factors are there in between, and it's very difficult. People are not able just now with machines only. They are not able to accept the things. But if you just try to say that okay, we're just creating too many kind of just like only bias-free kind of world, I don't think like, we are even nearly close to that kind of world, and it's not going to be a sustainable model. They will say, okay, we do not need the technology only. Because if you see, there are a lot of technology research, patents has been there, but because we as humans were not ready and we were not accepting that, we have just
Very
flushed them
true.
as they were just we have just put them into a backlog, and a lot of researches has been just gone into the waste just because we are not ready. It's not about the technology. We do not want some good things to get into that way. Better go slowly and then show the world that this is something really good advantage. I get the acceptance and then move. Instead of just blindly putting everything into a label.
Hmm. Okay, I can add another point here. My 2 cents about uh, when we are saying that why do we need biases in the first place? Because we as humans ourselves are judging all the time, right? We have our own preconceived notions, everything of that type, right? So, I, what I wanted to understand was primarily around now the algorithm is going to judge us. The algorithm is going to rank us in Uber or a Zomato delivery or something of that type, right? They are also gonna judge us in turn, and that is the legacy that we are trying to bring to the next generations. So if we pass on that inherent preconceived notions around this particular thing being of a particular type itself. We are typifying it. We are always doing classification problems. I'm not talking about that we are not doing classifications, but it is these inadvertent preconceived notions that have been historically ingrained in us. If we can shred a few of those practices that we don't want the future generations to carry forward, like for example that hey, women should not work, like that used to be the day in India, like before pre-independence era, right? Women should not even go to school for that matter. If assume for that matter, if that time someone say I want to build an AI and I don't want to build it in the fact that hey, women should not go to school, that is totally fine with me. That is the legacy that we would have inherited, and we would have always thought that hey, now and we have not reached to a stage of artificial general or artificial super intelligence for that matter. But what I'm trying to say is, if someday, not now, some decades down the line, if algorithms were to rule so a lot of decision making that we are trying to make, they should not have so much so much fair or so much biased understanding or representation of how the world looks, or and that way novelty or thinking around what exactly are their ancestors, that is what us people would have built in, should have gone away. That is what I would like to add.
Well, yeah. So being a woman, I can probably bring a completely contrarian view to, why AI biases must be considered. One is in terms of often it so happens that AI biases actually work as a mirror, and show to us the human society how biases creep into our decision systems, the human decision systems, right? The biggest example is Compass. I am sure you guys have discussed about it, where black people were seen to be discriminated for parole granting. I think it was a court in Texas or Arizona or someplace. They used it, and then there were a huge hue and cry that the repeat crime rates actually were wrongly predicted on the basis of previous judgments by mostly white judges who had an inherent bias of repeat crime prediction for blacks as being more likely, exactly opposed to what the data really said. Right. So the training data set was the
Okay.
judgment of the judges rather than the actual recrime rates of convicts who were out on parole. Yeah, you are saying something?
Yeah, I just want to add on the same thing. What you're saying, it's not only the black thing, the kind of area where they're living in, and that is like if you
Exactly.
are from a particular place, there's a
Pin
high
code
likelihood.
base. Yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
that's a very crucial one. Now you can't just a person who's staying somewhere. You're just like kind of putting. So that was
Yeah, so
also considered. Yeah.
economic situation based on the zip code of a person's address. Who will think of address introducing bias as an attribute into the system? But that
Exactly.
is how it is. So essentially, that is a good thing about AI, that depending on if we are conscious to bring out our own internal biases, if we ourselves say that okay, it's okay for us to live with biases in society, then no changes will ever happen, right? Then Trumps will always trump. But when we say that okay, biases are not a good thing, no matter what kind of bias, like being a woman, if only the woman man biases go, I cannot say that okay, I'm fine with racial bias, I'm fine with color bias, I'm just not fine with gender bias. That is not how societies ever progress, right? So any kind of biases, if AI acts as a mirror to us as a society and tells us that this is where I have detected bias and you can do something about it, I think that's a very very positive thing, and that is the first step. And the second step would be where if AI can actually, now suppose you're talking about so many generative algorithms, right? GAN, big GAN, BiGAN, and so on and so forth. With all these generative algorithms, think of a situation where like the collateral example that I was telling you about, the typical question, in fact, we had some discussions with another data science team of a very, very, very huge global investment bank. So they were saying that, so what if the quality of collaterals are actually bad for women and that actually results into women's loan repayment ability. So then it's fine to have a bias, because the bias is reflecting the economic reality of the system, not just social reality. So of course the bank needs to take that into account, right, to remain profitable. So but suppose if you can think of an AI model that can generate an alternative loan application processing logic itself, for, like I'm saying that the policy engine of reinforcement learning itself is designed by AI and not humans, right? So in that case you can train the GAN layers to generate alternative loan application processing logic, which will probably treat women applicants with a completely different set of attributes, which will reflect their payment potential or payback potential, as which will basically invent a different lens to look at loan applications, not the traditional lenses and the traditional attributes. So all our existing biases in our human decision systems, uh, two ways AI can help us overcome those. One is by acting as a mirror to detect that yes, there is bias between different groups and showcase it to us. The second is we can actually use AI itself to generate certain kind of new lenses to look at classification problems, which we ourselves, thanks to our own intrinsic implicit biases, we are not able to generate on our own.
Um, I mean, I do. So before we go ahead, I think it's very imperative. It's absolutely imperative for me to mention that to all the folks out there. When we talk about biases and AI, AI models, we are not talking about prejudices. Okay, biases in human beings are called presuppositions and prejudices, right? I mean, if I say back in like 100 years ago, if I would see a woman getting educated, I would have lost my mind. Okay, I guess anyone would have lost my mind. But that's because of some sort of presuppositions, prejudices. But when we talk about biases in AI, we are not talking about them per se. I mean, in some sense, yeah, they do reflect the presuppositions that they have gained through the data. And from where
Exactly.
do they get the data? They get the data from us. But I need to mention one thing before we move ahead to the next one, and that's one of the big, really good questions. You mentioned that why the AI, even though you masked the gender part in the loan thing, and they were still not getting enough loan to women, according to my understanding. Why did they do that? So they found out one, instead of gender, they focused on one particular thing, and it turned out to be that particular case. And I think that usually happens. So I would like to give two examples. So when you mentioned that about the crime rates among the blacks. Turns out it's not about the race. It turns out about the neighborhood, as Ashish said. It's about.
Yeah.
I mean, if you were to grow up in a, if you had mother, no father. I mean, in black community, it has been noticed that single parenthood is has skyrocketed since the invention of birth control pills. So men don't have, well, the young boys don't have role models to look for. So they will look for other people of their age, and there's no one to guide them. They will delve into activities that they will regret later, and some of them will end up in jail. Right? So it's not about race; it's about culture. And one of the things that nowadays we have a lot of women movement, women empowerment. I do agree with that. But when I learned that, hey man, I did some research and I found out it was not about as if women did not know how to stand up for themselves about 800 years ago. No, they knew how to do that. But since the invention of birth control pill, women could say no. I mean, earlier when back in the days when women had to rely on a husband, on a man, and if she's like if she's like pregnant with a baby, she can't do anything further. I mean, it literally halts you. Now, since the invention of birth control pill, women empowerment has skyrocketed. So it was not about gender per se. It was about the invention of one particular thing that could empower women. So these